Shalom, everyone. We're now ready to go into the main passage that we want to talk about, 1 Corinthians chapter 11. Now, here, based upon this chapter, we have where it is widely accepted in the non-Jewish world, in the Christian world, that a man should not have a head covering on his head at times that he prays, at the time he goes into services, that he does services before God, that when he eats, when he enters a house, that it is something that they were taught, or even myself, I was taught, that this was disrespectful. That when people pray, they say, take off your hat and bow your heads, please. When you come to the table, it is considered highly disrespectful, not only to the host of the house, but to God, that you would sit at the meal with your head covered. Now, this is in direct contrast to what we have in the Jewish world. The Jewish world, it is exactly the opposite, that one covers his head when he does any of these matters, and we've discussed this at length. Now, where does this come from in the Christian world? It comes from 1 Corinthians chapter 11. And I want to read this to you where in 1 Corinthians chapter 11, Paul is writing, and he says, imitate me just as I also imitate Messiah. So if we can discern what Paul is saying, then we would say that that applies to Paul. Therefore, it must in turn apply to Messiah. All right, so we're going to go to verse 2. We've talked about this already. Now, I praise you, brethren, that you remember me in all things and keep the paradosis. Now, if you remember, you can go back and see the video. Paradosis is the Greek word for the halakha, or the decision rendered by the Sanhedrin on how one keeps the commandments that we find in the Torah. Okay, so and keep the paradosis just as I delivered them to you. Okay, so we have Paul, we're very definitely able to prove that after he becomes a believer in Yeshua, that he continues in his observance of the commandments. Okay, so when he's talking about halakha, he's not talking about a new set of rules that are made for the people that become believers like him, but he's referring to the halakha that has been passed down from Sanhedrin to Sanhedrin of the Jewish people. All right, so verse 3. Now, in that halakha, we have that men have their heads covered when they pray, when they do services, when they eat. We have that wives, not necessarily adult women, but wives cover their heads when they pray, when they do services. And in fact, out of modesty, Jewish women cover their heads basically all the time. Okay, so we're going to go to verse 4. Let me finish. It says, verse 2, just as I delivered them to you. Verse 3, but I want you to know that the head of every man is Messiah, the head of woman is man, and the head of Messiah is God. So we have a hierarchy here. We have what I would call a covering. We have a woman, and her covering is her husband. It doesn't mean that he's higher than her. It means that he is the covering for her. Let me give you an example. In the Holy Temple, in the services, and in fact in the synagogues to this day, men have an obligation to pray. I mean, it is a halakha that they have an obligation. Women do not have that obligation. Now, it might seem like, well, God's discriminating against the women, but that's not it at all. It's that the men, first off, it says that you're to offer the offerings at their set time. Okay, so there's a set time that you cannot go past for certain prayers and certain ceremonies in the temple. The men would be free to schedule their time to be able to be here for that, but not so women, because women have to tend to children, and children have no clock. Women are providing for their families for the food. So women are encouraged to pray. Women are very anxious to pray. but they are not remiss if they miss a set time for prayer. Why? Because their husband is their covering. He goes and he's praying for the family, and the family's being covered. And so we have the woman is covered by her husband. The husband is covered by Messiah. Messiah is covered by Hashem himself. Okay, which you see in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, where we see Messiah is under Hashem. Okay, so we're going to go forward from here, and it says, verse 4. Now this is the big verse. It says, every man praying or prophesying, having his head covered, dishonors his head. Now, that's not exactly what the verse says in Greek. Literally what the verse says, and I want to show you an article. If we have the link up here that you can read the article. I don't agree with everything in this article, but it's called Wild Hair and Gender Equality in 1 Corinthians chapter 11, verses 2 through 16. This is by Philip Payne. Philip Payne is taught at Cambridge University. He's taught all over, and he has credentials that are unbelievable. They're just tremendous. Okay, so I want to read you a little bit of what he says. 1 Corinthians chapter 11 repeatedly identifies problems regarding men's and women's head coverings as disgraceful, improper, and degrading, and morally what one ought not to do. Nevertheless, interpretations typically identify the head covering as something that was not generally regarded as disgraceful or a symbol of immorality in Hellenistic and Roman cultures. In other words, it says that in Hellenistic cultures, for a man to have his head covered when he prays was not seen as a disgrace, a dishonor. In Roman society, it wasn't seen as a disgrace. And certainly in Jewish society, it wasn't seen as a disgrace. Most interpretations have not taken into account two crucial cultural conventions regarding head coverings. First, it was generally regarded as disgraceful for men to wear long, effeminate hair. Effeminate hair was commonly ridiculed as disgraceful because of its association with homosexuality. Second, in Hellenistic, Roman, and Jewish cultures for centuries preceding and following the time of Paul, virtually all of the portraiture, sculpture, and other graphic evidence depicts respectable women's hair done up, not let down loose. Most of the relatively few cases of hair let down loose depict disgraceful revelries. Right, now I'm going to go forward. Yeah, the word, and I've got this here for you. Now, I've got to warn you, I am not one that reads Greek. When I come to a Greek text, I have to pull out a Greek dictionary and work through it word by word. I have to go to a lexicon and identify this word. Thank God that the computers have made this much easier to do. But we have in verse 4 where it says, every man praying or prophesying, having his head covered. The word covered is not literally going to be the word that is used here. In fact, I don't have the second word, and I will get that before we do a next video. But it literally translates as it translates as hanging down from the head. So it doesn't say that a man having his head covered dishonors his head. It says that man hanging down from his head dishonors his head. Now, lo and behold, this phrase or this expression happens to turn up all over the ancient world. And it deals with what's called wild hair. So, for instance, we have I've got a whole list of them here, Pseudo-Phylactides, or Phylactides, Phocylides, who was about 30 BCE to Common Era or AD 40. So he's first century. In his work, paragraphs 210 through 214, advised long hair is not fit for men. Philo was a very famous Jewish writer from Alexandria, Egypt, in the 1st century BCE. Philo, his special laws, this will be from Common Era 3 to 9. And then we have also his book, book 3, paragraphs 37 through 42 states, a much graver evil has wrapped its way into the cities, the disease of effemination. Mark how conspicuously they braid and adorn the hair of their heads. The law ordains that the man, woman who debases the starling coin of nature should perish. These are grievous vices of unmanliness and effeminacy, licentiousness and effeminacy. We have the Stoic, Musonius Rufus, which is going to be Common Era AD 66, called hair a covering by nature and objected to men cutting the hair to appear as women and to be seen as womanish, something that should be avoided at all costs. Josephus, Flavius Josephus. Now, Josephus is a major writer that we depend on to understand the Jewish world, especially in the 1st century. He was a Cohen. He was the commanding general of the rebel forces against the Romans in the north. He wrote 4 books called The Antiquities of the Jews, which was multi-volume. He wrote The Wars of the Jews, which was smaller than Antiquities, but a major work, The Wars of the Jews. He wrote The Life of Flavius Josephus, and he wrote a response to an anti-Semitic work that was called Against Apium. And so he defended the Jewish people. But he wrote the history of the Jewish people and the customs of the Jewish people in great, great detail. And so Josephus in the Jewish War states in Volume 4, Book 4, paragraphs 561 to 63 states they unscrupulously indulged in effeminate practices, plaiting their hair. Now, I'm just going to mention a few more of these, just to give you an idea. We have Plutarch's Moralia. We have the whole 1st chapter of the book 3 of Arian's Discourses of Epictetus. We have Dio Crescentum. We have the Juvenile Satire 2. And you can get all of these, all the references, by going to that link and looking it up for yourself. But consistently, while they're not condemning having long hair, they're condemning long hair for a man for the purpose of appearing effeminate, of appearing as a woman. Now, likewise, they are going to condemn women for having their hair where it's cut so that they appear as a man. Now, this is going to really deal with, and we'll go in our next video into some of the detail about it, it's going to deal with the core of idolatry. And that core happened to be with a major temple to Dionysus right there at Corinth. And so, basically, what he is saying, and if I can come back to this, it says in verse 4, every man praying or prophesying having his head hanging down dishonors his head. Now, we're going to talk in our next video a little bit about the word dishonor and how that plays in. But every woman who prays or prophesies with her head uncovered. And again, I can give you the word that is used here for this. For the uncovered, it is going to be akaptoluptos. Now, akaptoluptos means for her hair to be unveiled. In the past, I taught the wild hair, but for the men. But I said that the verse teaches that women should have their heads covered. I disagree with that now. I've been convinced by this article and other research that the whole chapter, 1 Corinthians 11, is not dealing with head coverings, hats, veils for either men or women. The whole purpose of this is that it's dealing with idolatry. It's dealing with exactly where we saw in the Torah in Vayikra, Leviticus, and chapter 10, and also where we saw in Ezekiel chapter 44, where that the prohibition against having wild hair dealt with don't bring idolatry to my temple. And likewise, don't bring idolatry to the table or to prayer or to the study of Torah. So we'll go into this in more detail, and we'll look and see exactly what 1 Corinthians chapter 11 is telling us. Shalom. Shalom. Thank you for watching our video. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe. Click the notifications button. If you have questions or comments, the comments section. Go to our website at hatikva.org. You might be interested in the temple. Measure the pattern, which is our exhaustive work on the Holy Temple. Shalom.